Okay. Are we online also? I've prepared absolutely nothing. So if you have any questions or subjects that you would like me to address in the context of Swamiji, so we'll say a prayer, have a few minutes of meditation, and then if anything occurs to you, otherwise I'm on my own. Yes, you're completely hidden there, so there's plenty of room to just move around. Okay. So let's start with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master, Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, dear friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to all. Open our hearts that we may feel your living presence, that we may receive your guidance, that we may act as instruments of your loving presence in all that we do. Om, peace, Amen. Let's meditate now just for a few minutes. Om. Peace. Amen. So, is there any way you would like me to focus this evening's conversation? Any questions? Sort of, rather than answering a question, I'm collecting ideas. I mean, a lot of you I know, some of you I don't. Some of you have heard a lot about Swami. Is there anything particular you'd like to hear tonight? If not, I will sail out on my own. Yes, Ellen. Where is it? Pooja has it. Would you hand it to Ellen, please? This is so the people who are watching online can hear. You have to put it close to your mouth. Yeah.
Yes, based on the other speakers.
It's not working for some reason. It never works. Let's try to get both of the things going. Can you figure it out? There you go. Thank you.
Okay. Based on the speakers from the previous weeks, it's become more and more apparent to me that it's phenomenal what he accomplished in his lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if he had a vision for this and then just proceeded toward the vision, or if he started out and it just developed as he went forward. Because when you look at what Ananda is today, and to go back to the 1960s, and to think that he had that vision, that would be incredible.
Oh, it is incredible. Although Swamiji often corrected me on the word incredible, because that means it's not credible, and it is entirely credible. But in any case, I can just address that issue, and then if there's others, we can go. Is there, or does somebody else have a burning thought that we need to get onto the table? Okay, Judah, what's yours?
In some internet talks that I've recently watched, that you did, you quoted Swami Kriyananda as saying, at death, nothing happens.
Right.
And this seems to be in quite stark contrast to the previous month's work here called Preparing for the Final Exam, in which
Right, I
we
know
were
the class.
encouraged to
Mm-hmm.
take every breath and make every effort to get ready for the transition that occurs at
I can
death.
reconcile that. You want me to help reconcile those points? Yeah. Okay, that would be fair. What about you?
I've been reading Light Bear, and
Right.
the book, and if you can somehow talk about what is that transition of what it is to be with Swami and to have his energy next to you,
Right.
and for him to be guiding you, and when is the transition that it's time for you to be on your own?
Yeah, I'm sorry, the last part, say again.
The transition between him being there with you,
Uh-huh.
and now it's time for you to be on your own, to create
Yeah.
now it's like, I'm not going to hold your hand now.
Right.
How can you maintain that that vibration?
Yeah.
And it's time to operate.
A very real question, all of them. Okay, anything else before we launch in? Okay. And what is your name, sir?
Jason.
Jason, okay.
Yes, I was actually reading the Light Bearer book as well. And I grew up atheist before age 30, and some of the things in the book are kind of far out there. For example, there's a chapter where it seems that Swamiji is saying that the Atlanteans really existed, and a lot of Americans today are the reincarnation of people from Atlantis. Is that to be taken literally?
Okay. Yes, okay. All right, I think that'll be enough for us to get going. Let's start, and then if Mary, did you have something? No. If we run out of steam, then we'll go. Okay, let's see where to start. I think I'll start with what Ellen was asking. Even though we sat there next to Swamiji, and Keshava and Dai are here, I worked for Swami as his secretary, and then Keshava took the job when he booted me out. So we've been, in this together for a really long time. Daya came not somewhere along the way there, yeah. These are our two center leaders from Delhi, but they're visiting her mother here. So every so often we get their company. Raise your hands and wave to the people. Okay. Okay. But they both are from here. Keshava came and stayed here for a few years, helping when we were in litigation, and Daya started in this temple. So she belongs to us forever. The phrase is, she serves at our pleasure somewhere else, like Queen Elizabeth or Queen Victoria, whoever it was who said it. But anyway, going back to, even if you were there watching it and watched it go day by day, it was always out of the ordinary if you were paying attention. One thing it took me a while to figure out about Swamiji, because the rational mind makes plans. You have your 5-year business plan. You in order to get your funding, you explain how this is going to happen and that's going to happen. And Swamiji never. It was both things. He totally believed the way Master explained how self-realization would impact the planet. That who Master himself was, who had sent him, why he was here. He had just complete, from the first reading of the autobiography of a yogi, he had complete trust in what Master said. At the same time, he never turned off his own mind, Swamiji, so he didn't always understand how it was going to all fit together. I was just listening to a recording this morning, and he used the same words that I've used in regard to Swami. You couldn't necessarily accept it, but nor could you reject it either. You just had to wait and see what happened. Swamiji felt powerfully commissioned by Master to carry on the work in a practical way. Master's told him repeatedly, you have a great work to do. Now, later on, Swami talked about when Master was William the Conqueror, Swamiji was Henry the First, and ended up with full responsibility for everything. When Master was Ferdinand III in Spain, Swami was Alfonso X, and in both cases he was a physical child, he was the son. And in both cases, and these are just two that have been talked about, Master started it, and then Swamiji brought it into clear focus. Because as Swami described Master, an avatar is like a meteor streaking across the sky and just has to set this enormous energy pattern. And it is the job of the disciples, both as a service to their guru and also as a way of developing their own attunement and spiritual maturity, to take what the guru has done and then move it to the next step. So in all three of those cases, Swami had the role of doing what his father, in this case his spiritual father, had laid out, and then making it specific. And Swami never rested from that responsibility. And especially once everything evolved and he was expelled from SRF, and he saw the direction that SRF was going, how they were taking the teachings, as in contrast to the way Swami Kriyananda felt that Master really intended it. So he felt also this extraordinary sense of responsibility not to allow the world-changing mission of Master to become a monastery in Los Angeles. It was just unthinkable to him that he would allow that to happen. He also cared not at all for his own comfort. It's just he wasn't here to be comfortable. You know, he didn't see life on earth like most people do, as a way to kind of just hunker down and make yourself comfortable and let the years pass. You know, get yourself a little home, get yourself a little group, get yourself a little job, retire from your little job, and then, that was just completely, it's not merely that he wasn't interested, it was like nowhere in his consciousness. He had a human body. He took it for one purpose. It was to serve his guru, period. And because he is who he is, and because he was so in tune with Master, there was literally a never-ending flow of creative ideas that came through him. The number of ideas that he had compared to the ones he expressed, I mean, he expressed a fraction of what was possible. And he was always trying to get others of us, to have enough energy to do something, which we did a little bit, but never anything compared to him. But he always made it seem, and it was true, that any of us could do what he did. If we just put our attention at the point between the eyebrows and asked Master to help, and then it would just be given to us. And he would repeatedly, I remember in the early, well, he did this many different times, but he would sometimes come to weekly or satsangs that we would have with the community, bring a list of all that he'd done that week. The book that he finished, the songs that he wrote, the lectures that he gave, the slideshows that he put together, just like this. And he would just kind of read it off. And many people in the community at the beginning just thought he was a hopeless egotist because he'd come and he'd tell us all these things. But at the end, he would always say, I didn't think I could do it, but I just put my attention at the point between the eyebrows and asked Master to help me. And he was really trying to tell us what we could do. That, you all are just, you're not trying hard enough. I remember a conversation, it was about prosperity. And we had decided that we were going to try to become more prosperous. Because this was in the early 70s, the phrase then was poverty consciousness. We had poverty consciousness. I mean, we didn't have poverty consciousness. We were poor. We didn't have any money. It didn't matter about our consciousness. We lived in teepees and broken down trailers and old sheds. And I mean, there was just, every so often somebody would put together a little house. I was at the seclusion retreat, which is where I lived for a number of years, when it was really one of the primary community places. And I remember these houses that were built, and I remember when they were built, they were huge, they were luxurious, they were just astonishing, and they aren't. Just through my present day eyes, they were very simple little cabins, and they've been upgraded considerably since their inception. But anyway, we had, quote, poverty consciousness. I actually realized we didn't have poverty consciousness. What we actually had was little rich kid consciousness, which is that we didn't understand how hard you had to work for money. We thought you just put out a little bit of energy, and be a really nice person and have nice ideas and chant a little bit, and that somehow money would fall in your lap. And it really was exactly the opposite. We just, to understand the relationship between work and money is a very extremely important life skill that most of us had come from fairly comfortable homes, and it just wasn't in our consciousness. But in that, Swamiji was always affirming. He would, like every Spiritual Renewal Week, he would say, I think this year we're going to have 200 people at Spiritual Renewal Week. And we would all immediately go, sure, Swami. I mean, as soon as he would put out a little positive energy, we did our best to kill it, just like that. And he said something when we were having this conversation about prosperity, because people were beginning to look to all these other manifesting. There were a lot of things at that time, people who could teach you how to manifest. So they were going, I can't remember the names of any of them, but I said to Swami, I can't imagine that we actually need, to go outside of Master's teachings to find this. He taught about success all the time. It seems like we must have it within our own teaching. And he said, this was when he said, the secret of prosperity is creativity. He said, just creativity, that if this doesn't work, I'll try that. If that doesn't work, I'll try this next thing. If this one doesn't work, I'll try this. But of course, you see how much energy that involves. And this just determined like this. And then he said, when I say we're going to have 200 people for Spiritual Renewal Week, he said, none of you believe me. He said, but if I didn't put out as much energy as I do, we wouldn't even have the 35 that actually come. So he was always operating on many different levels, but he seldom bothered to explain that because it would have been patronizing if he'd done that. You know, it would have been making us disempowering to us and falsely elevating to him. So he played it just pretty straight. But he was, what I would say about Swami is that it's just every day it was, what more can I do? So it wasn't so much like he had all these ideas out, although many ideas that he eventually acted on, of course, he'd had in his head, in his heart, in his mind for a long time. But it was also just every day, what more can I do? And he was always asking that question in a way that really none of the rest of us were, or because we wouldn't have known what to do with the answer. We didn't have the unblocked creativity that he had. Swami just had completely unblocked energy. It took me a very long time to become comfortable writing. It's actually now it was about 20 years ago that I published that first book. And once I got that one done, I was able to move forward. But that was 2003 or 2006. So for all those years in between, I was neurotic. There's no other word for it, but I was. And I said something to Swami about writer's block. And he said, I never have writer's block. I've never had writer's block. Just like, oh. And he didn't say that to make me feel bad. He was just saying, put your attention to the point between the eyebrows and just ask Master to help you. You know, you don't have to just always be asking the question, what about me? What about me? What about me? And how much energy goes into that. And Swami just had none of it. If it needed to be done and Master wanted it done, then he would do it. And that was part of why he could. It was just, he had this absolute confidence in the flow of inspiration. And whenever he was too tired or in any way he felt obstacles, he would just ask Master to help him. And the secret of it was that relationship. But in general, you know, did he have a vision? At the very beginning of, you know, in the early 70s, he would talk about how he laid it out like this. First, we'll build strongly on the West Coast. Then we'll build on the East Coast. Then we'll go to Europe. Then we'll go to Australia. And then we'll go to India. I mean, bear in mind, this is when we were a small group of impoverished people hoping that we could pay the mortgage the next month. And I mean, my salary from Swami when I worked for him was $50 a month, which he just would open his wallet and hand to me. I was exempted from a number of fees because I was working for him as a support for him. They exempted me. But that was what I made. Nitai, who was running our school, which was at that point was a converted chicken coop with 7 children in it, and he'd been a position. He'd had a position in public school before he moved there, and then he started the school. But there was no money for the school. They paid him $25 a month, $25, and he would make incense in the afternoons in order to earn enough money to basically buy food and pay the minor rents like this. Yeah, it wasn't a lot. In fact, if I remember the story correctly, his parents, he said he was still working, he was saying he'd moved to this place and he was working as a school teacher. They said, what is your salary? And as I understand the story, Nitai said 25, and they said 25,000 a year, that's very good. And he didn't correct it. Because he thought it was easier just not to correct it. That's how I remember him telling the story. It was something along those lines. But in this context, when Swami would say, you know, we're going to build communities on the West Coast, we're going to build on the East Coast, we're going to go here, we're going to go there, I would just listen. I had no reason to disbelieve him, but I had no reason. There was nothing in me that could relate to it. But I I had limitless regard for Swami Kriyananda, and I felt with him and by him, anything was possible. So if he said we were going to do that, okay. But he himself said he stopped talking like that after a while because it frightened more people than it inspired. They just couldn't. And a lot of the people who came there were really wanting to just drop out of the world. It was the time when everybody was turning their back on society. In fact, we had a lot of trouble with our neighbors because they had really come to drop out. I mean, they wanted to just leave the world behind, and there was the whole economy there until recently was illegal marijuana. So they really did not want any attention brought to the area. And then we move in, and we start advertising worldwide. Come, to the North San Juan Ridge and visit this spiritual community. And, there was a clash of values. Even though we looked like we might agree with each other, we were really on opposite things, and that was part of it. But what also I was going to say about Swamiji is, and he articulated this to me later, he trusted the inspirations that came to him. I said he didn't have any blocks to creativity. He didn't have any fear of committing his willpower to accomplish something, in contrast to most of us. He wasn't concerned about his own position. He didn't care whether he was, worldwide praised or people thought him a fool. He cared about one thing, which is that he pleased his guru. And if he felt he was doing what his guru wanted, it wasn't for him just a theory. It was just a fact. He just didn't care. That was the only thing that mattered. But he'd learned over many lifetimes. As he said, he's just been a leader for so many lifetimes, he doesn't even think about it. It just comes to him. But whatever intuitions or inspirations would come to him in the way that he knew they came from Master, and I don't think he had to ask the question the way some of us do, what level is this coming from? He would just do it without having any idea what the next step was. Just whatever, if this is what he's supposed to do, he would just do it with full energy, with the full knowledge that the next step would be revealed. And that also gave him prodigious creativity, because he could just respond. He'd get an impulse in the afternoon, and by the evening it was already happening. The Nayaswami order was a very dramatic example of that. Swami had been really near unto death for several weeks. Miriam said later there were 3 or 4 things that could have killed him at any point. And then he had a vision, as he put it later, he had a vision of Master and, said to Master, take me or leave me here, whichever you want is just fine. And then he sat up from that with the realization that it was time to start the Nayaswami order. He had been so weak that I literally had to button his shirt. I don't know if you've ever taken care of an elderly person and they just can't do it. I had to button his shirt. He lay down on the couch. I left him for 5 minutes and went and made his bed and straightened up his bedroom. I came back and he said this was what Satan was trying to stop. He got up from the couch and went into the dining room and started where his computer was, and started writing a book. Then he called everyone and had them all come over and told them that we were going to start this new renunciate order. And so that kind of creativity and productivity was part of a whole way of living. But bear in mind, even if you can't go to the whole of it, it's directional. It's a directional way of living, which is to follow your intuitions. And not everything Swami did worked out by a long shot. And he actually tells the story. What specifically catalyzed his expulsion from SRF was his extremely daring plans for building YSS, it's called in India, Master's work in India, which was to get land in the city of New Delhi, which the government was going to give to him to build a temple there. Prime Minister Nehru, this is 1961, gifted him, which is to say Master's organization, with 25 acres of open land, right in the heart of Delhi, and he had all these people to help him, and he was going to build a temple there for Master. And it was so bold and so out of the box that the people in Los Angeles just didn't know what to do with it. They decided that he was trying to set himself up, to be a rival. So they expelled him. But Swami says elsewhere, he said, I was there in Delhi. If I didn't succeed in making something happen, I was going to have to go back to Calcutta. I didn't want to go back to Calcutta. I really felt like Delhi was the place to build, but I didn't feel any guidance from Master specifically about what to do. So I thought I would see what happens when I just do it with willpower. And he said, because I knew I could do it with willpower. So he did it with willpower, he succeeded mightily, and it all blew up. So he learned. But think of the courage of that. Just the courage to do it. And of course, you can put other reasons behind it, but just even the fact that he was willing to try like that. He just didn't have fear, which is what binds almost all of us. And he just had the capacity to master physical, emotional, mental resistance. He could just master it. I can hardly think of a day, even, through operations and serious illnesses and all sorts of things, when Swami didn't do at least some creative, serviceful work. No. He didn't, even when he was collapsing, or on holiday or something, nonetheless, he would still converse with us and share creative ideas or just edit some book casually or write some book while he in his spare time or whatever it was. He was always. So that would be how I would put it. Most of us enjoy just becoming tamasic, meaning just collapsing into a tamasic state. Swami didn't. He didn't enjoy that. It was an interesting observation. It wasn't that he never sat and watched a movie or slept a few extra hours or just sat around and drank tea or something like that. But he didn't enjoy that kind of really low subconscious energy that some of the rest of us find it to be a pleasant respite. He wasn't trying to escape higher consciousness. Although his phrase, sometimes he would say, how are you feeling, sir? Are you tired? I'm not tired, he said, but then he would sometimes say, I'm tired of, which just meant of everything. I'm just tired of the necessities of life. But he would get over it. He would say it like that, partly just to make it a little humorous so that we could go on after that. He had his moments. I don't want to present it as if he was a one-dimensional character. His heart, he was very tender-hearted. He said to me once, just because I'm impersonal about myself. See, most of us, we have some little thing, somebody treats us badly, or we behave badly, and then we feel guilty about it, or we have something we hope to get, and we didn't get it. We're very involved with ourselves. And there's this sort of feeling of me, and what happened to me, and poor me. My humorous way of dealing with this in recent years has been the phrase, nobody cares about me but me, which is an exaggeration, but sometimes when you exaggerate, you feel it a little better. Nobody cares about me but me. And that's how we behave. Swami was impersonal about himself, and as he said, because he was impersonal, people would, including me, for a time, I would misread him. I would think that he was impervious, and he wasn't at all impervious. In fact, he said, I'm far more sensitive than most people are, because he could feel people's energy and he could see the consequences of their actions. And, he was just much more aware, not less. But he saw himself as just another person having an experience rather than me having the experience. And so as a consequence, even when things happen, he was more like an actor playing the part and he would play the part properly, or as he himself said, Kriyananda was an event that he was responsible for. And that meant the personality and the feelings, all of that. He was responsible for those, so he did them properly. But he never disappeared into Kriyananda the way most of us disappear into our personal identity. And as a result, even when difficult things happened, which God knows they did, and he would have to go through them, he was always able to also, almost always able to also just carry on and separate the two. You know, Kriyananda was having a hard time, but Master wants a book written. And so he would write the book, even though Kriyananda was having to face all kinds of challenges at that time. All of this is how he was able to do it. And all of this is principles and practices that are somewhat beyond our reach, but are on the same wire that we're already moving on. It's just, this is what happens when you get better at it. You know, that when you get more in tune and more energy and a bigger perspective, this is what it begins to look like. Oh, okay. Jito's not in the room, so I'll wait till he comes in again. And so then Esther asked, oh, you were asking just about how it was to be there.
How it is once you have all this time with him, and now it's time, probably at one point he was telling everybody,
Yeah.
now it's your turn.
Well, you know, it was always our turn. And let me think how to say this. He always gave us as much to do as we were willing to take. You know, there was never any protecting us from the opportunity to learn. There was, in all the years that I was with him, he never made me feel like I was an inexperienced, arrogant twerp, which he could easily have made me feel that way. You know, he never made you feel like you were anything but a completely respected member of the crew. He assigned and asked things of you in an appropriate way, but he always tried to give us the energy and the capacity to go on. So there was never a feeling of dependency. It was always a feeling of we all just did our best, but of course you had him as a reference. You know, even though I lived at Ananda Village for 16 years, and during most of that time I lived right near Swamiji. During some of that time I saw him every day. And so it was, the rhythm of my life was entirely defined by Swami. It still is, but by his physical presence where he was. And he would advise and help. I didn't listen to him as much as I should have. I didn't ask him as much as I should have because I didn't know how to learn from him as much as I learned later. After 16 years, he sent us here, where I've been for 37 years. And it was actually once I was away from him that I learned how to draw his energy more than I had when I was with him. And I don't think it was just a question of distance. I think it was just my own maturity. I just finally got myself organized. It only took 20 years. Maybe not quite, 16 actually. But he himself said, he himself said that his consciousness was always with us no matter where we were. And he was always projecting energy to us and projecting thoughts and ideas to us. I don't know if it would be really like I'm going to tell her to buy a bookstore, but it was more on the level of, I think, vibration. And if we felt in tune with that, if we were interested in receiving it, and if the vibration or the thoughts he was sending we felt in tune with, they would they would pop into our heads. You know how ideas, you never know where ideas come from. You just wake up and say, oh, this would be a good idea, let's do this. And only slowly did I come to realize how specifically I was receiving his thoughts. I just thought I was clever. But that's not fair, that overstates it. But I gradually came to appreciate how much I was receiving his thoughts. And that's how I knew what to do. But they matched my energy. His thoughts matched my energy, if I can put it that way, and that's why I could receive them. Who knows what else he sent that I couldn't receive? But I could, what matched, I could take and move with. In the years, especially when we were putting this together, we just, strange as it seems, we always knew what to do. There was hardly a time when we didn't know what to do. It just, everything would just follow. What classes to give, and when to do this, when to bring this activity, and when to do that. It just, we never hesitated. We never sort of anguished. There were things that were better and worse ideas, and some things didn't work out. But there was never just sitting there wringing our hands, wondering what to do next, because his flow was always there. We were really in tune with what he wanted to have happen. But we weren't with him, and we weren't calling him on the phone. We did communicate with Swamiji, constantly. We were, during all those years, he talked on the phone a lot. Then we had email, and we would travel with him. And so there was a constant contact, and he made a point of visiting here really often, partly because we have this wonderful international airport, thank God for that. We were just the gateway in and out of the country. He also came to support us because this was one of the first. We were just, these urban communities were just starting and nobody really knew what to do, so he would come and give it energy a lot. And yeah, I just having him come in and out of the door was just about the best thing ever. It just made you feel so happy. Just whenever he would come, you just feel so happy. Even when we were in the midst of 12 years of litigation, because we also had both the courthouse and the lawyer right here. So he would have to come and stay in the house sometimes for weeks at a time. And he was just, I'll contrast this to the way it felt after he died. By the time he died in whatever year it was, 2013, he had well-established a home in Italy and well-established a home in India, and he was only even sometimes in California. I moved around, so I saw him every few months somewhere along the way, and we would still talk on the phone and trade emails and all of that. Did we talk on the phone? We must have, but he couldn't have called us easily from other countries. But we were in constant communications, the only way I could say it. By then, we were considered to be grown up. I felt like when he died, I was about 12. I was more like a precocious 9-year-old for most of the time that I was with him, but I got up to the age of 12 by the time he died. I was old enough to stay without a babysitter. That's how I felt. That's just how it felt to me, because he was compared to what real maturity looked like. I felt like I was early adolescence. But when he died, the earth ceased to have a center. That's how it felt to me. As long as Swami Kriyananda was in the body, wherever he was, in any country, that was the center of the universe. And it was almost like that was the magnetic center, and so everything was guided by that. And it was actually extremely interesting because he was 86 years old. He wasn't in good health. He died. We had 15 minutes warning from the time that someone said he was unwell until they said he was gone. I had always imagined, I just totally made this up, but I had always imagined that there would be this long goodbye, like Ramakrishna was at this Kazipur garden house for 6 months or 9 months, and everybody came and went. That's what I thought. I never thought it would just be 2 phone calls in the middle of the night, which is Swami's having trouble breathing. Swami's gone in 15 minutes. But even though, we knew it would happen, and there he was, and I was actually literally then in Italy, and here's his lifeless body is in an open casket right in front of us. It was also liberating, because all of a sudden everything became the same. His physical presence always divided the world into where he was and where he wasn't. And that was a limiting condition to a certain extent on my happiness at all times, where he was and where he wasn't. Despite the fact that I still felt this flow of energy all the time. But once he was out of the body, then he was equally everywhere. And a great freedom came into me. Now I move around a lot. I wasn't doing that then. And so it was an interesting loss and gain. And during the service that they had there, one of the services when I was there, a few of us, a dozen or so people from around the world, maybe more, just went to Assisi the day after he died. And his casket was there, and we were having this service, and then somebody put his voice on a speaker, and the recording was so clear that it startled you. It's just like you thought he was speaking, but he was dead in front of you, so it was a little confusing. So I hear his voice, and then I think he's the speaker. It's strange things your mind do. So I'm looking at the speaker, trying to see Swami, and of course I realize this is an electronic device. This is not a person. So I looked to his body, and I tried to receive the voice from the body. And that didn't work either. Then I looked at the pictures of the masters, and Swami's picture wasn't on the altar at all, so he wasn't there. And then I went up and looked at the spiritual eye. My eyes went up. And then that suddenly sort of anchored the source of where his voice was coming from. And that was that's sort of the way I felt it ever since. I definitely miss the fact that he doesn't come through the door anymore. And it took me, now it's been more than 10 years, but it's taken me a long time to realize he wasn't going to come through that door, because there would be long periods of time when he wasn't in the house. But to realize that he would never come into the house. And also then to realize that my automatic reset was not going to be automatic anymore. It was going to have to be a deliberate act of will to bring my energy up to what one could effortlessly have in his company. So all that took time. And I was a little afraid for a while. The way I put it to myself was, he held my kite string. So even though I could blow around a lot in the wind, he was holding the kite string. And so I was always going to be safe. And I did get, insofar as I became distraught, about who was going to hold my kite string. Yeah, or the kite string of me, you understand, like that. But he just has, just differently. But he's never stopped doing so. Yeah, I think that would be the way to say it. Is that helpful? And I'm very gratified when people tell me, who've never met him, that they can feel his consciousness, because one could, if one wants to. There's just, it's going to be a long time before who he is really rises out of his life. There was a time when the president of some major publishing company became totally enamored of Swami Kriyananda, and that company, Time Warner is what it was, although I think it was just Warner at that time. I think it became Time Warner Books after that. They had sponsored Jane Fonda, the actress, who became like a sort of yoga mentor for a while. She became a big cheese in yoga. Apparently this man had been the one that had created the persona that was so popular. So he said to Swami that he was going to make him the Jane Fonda of meditation. It always amused me when they would use some absurd comparison. And I think Swami wasn't really sure who Jane Fonda was. But he said to the man, he said, I'm willing to try. He said, but I have to warn you. He said, I am the kind of author who doesn't become popular until long after he's dead. And it didn't work, because Swami was just completely out of tune with the times. And as he said, thank God, who would want to be in tune with these times? And he's writing for the future. And how far away that future is, I don't know. In the preface, in the introduction to Light Bearer, I said that Swami Kriyananda created an entire alternative universe, an entire culture of self-realization. And I said, at the present moment, very few people care. But the day will come when they do, either as one by one as individuals or society as a whole. And then people will be very impressed to realize that the whole roadmap is out there. But when you're changing the yuga, you can't just speak to the times. You have to speak to where, you have to be so far in front of it so that when people lift their eyes, they'll see you. If you're where people are, it goes by too fast. That's why the people who are world famous now are just forgotten. Nobody remembers anybody except in the life of Jesus, except if you happen to touch the life of Jesus. Otherwise, you were totally nobody. But it looked the opposite at the time. So that's what we're working with this. Jito, your question about death and dying, what Swamiji said, nothing happens when you die, was explaining that there's no escape from our own consciousness. That's what he was trying to say. Because sometimes people think, oh, well, I'll die, and then that will make me someone else. But no, actually it doesn't. And that's really what he wanted us to understand. You have to face, you have to deal with, you have to resolve, you have to transcend every limitation eventually. And just dying, and that's why suicide doesn't really help, even though it seems like a reasonable idea, and people think it's a good idea at the time because they find their consciousness intolerable, so they think they can escape it by killing their body, but nothing happens when you die. You just take off the body, but all we're ever actually experiencing it without realizing it is our own mind, is our own consciousness. However, there are countless ways that we can influence our consciousness, and the fact of impending death is a very strong incentive to do everything we can now to resolve whatever issues have come up, because there they are right in front of us. And if we postpone them, we often lose connection with what's really going on, and they come up and we don't remember. In future lifetimes. We think somebody's actually mistreating us, and we like and we dislike, and we have no idea where those likes and dislikes come from. It's extremely inefficient. That's why we incarnate so many times. So why not resolve karma now? Because nothing happens when you die in that context. Okay? Now, your question, remind me what you said, Jason. Jason, if I...
Did Swami Kriyananda literally believe in Atlantis?
Oh, did he literally believe in Atlantis? Oh, yes, I knew that was a charming question. Okay, you can take it back, Pooja, it's not. Swamiji said when he came to Master, Swami had never heard the words guru, yoga, anything like that. When he first heard the word yoga, he thought it was yogurt. That's what he says, at least. I mean, it was just, this was 1948. None of this was known. Reincarnation, all of these things were just totally outside his life experience or the experiences of society at that time. So when he went, and within 1 week of opening Autobiography of a Yogi, he was a monk in the ashram in Los Angeles. He'd gone from New York City to Los Angeles, had become a monk in the ashram, and all of that was happening. He said sometimes he would actually literally be dizzy, and he'd have to sit down because the change was so enormous. So there were countless things that Master said that were just, Swami had no idea what to do with them. He just, like the way you're feeling about Atlantis or something like that. And even more, to make it more confusing, things were very kind of random during that time. Master didn't have everything tightly organized. And so a lot of the other monks contributed even more preposterous stories. So some of their stories were even more far out, but not necessarily so. And Swami would always have to ask, did Master say that? Because if it was Yogananda's words and his teaching or belief, Swami, see what had happened was Swami had a recognition and a resonance with Master. He put it, he said his entire life he'd always felt in a world that he lived in a world of his own that no one else shared. And I mean, it wasn't that he didn't have family or friends, but he just, his inner world was unique. No one shared it. As soon as he read Autobiography of a Yogi, he said he felt that he and Master lived in the same world. And he understood him and he trusted him, he respected him, he loved him. So whatever Master said, he couldn't reject it because he knew the source was true. No matter how strange and preposterous the idea was, he knew that Master would never have said it if he didn't know that it was true. So Swami just had to take it like that. I was giving a class once at the seclusion retreat, which is, for most of you know, it's 6 miles back on that unpaved road. And I didn't have a car. I must have borrowed somebody else's car. But there was some young man who'd hitchhiked up to the community, and he wanted to go up to the class, so I drove him back. He'd managed to hitchhike to the retreat, and then I drove him back. And I'd given a class about reincarnation in which I'd said a lot of far-out things. And the man actually, when we're like in the middle of this barren wilderness and there's not a soul around, he turns to me and says, "Do you actually believe all that stuff?" You know, like it's just you and me and I'll never tell. I said, actually I do. I do believe all that stuff. It's become resonantly true to me. So what happens when you really start down this path is that one realizes that one has taken the narrowest possible view of the world for no particular reason, except that it just more people talk in narrow terms than talk in expansive terms. But it's not really that we know that the world is as narrow as this. It's just that we are habituated to thinking it is. Yogananda says in his book, most people make no spiritual progress for lack of spiritual adventurousness, is how he put it. It was a very interesting phrase. So once you start into reincarnation, and I mean, there's solid grounds for all of that. Karma, reincarnation, the chakra system, and the yugas. And these are 4 realities that all work together. The yugas is the level of consciousness on the planet, and the fact that this planet is sometimes much more advanced and then falls again in a circular pattern. That's the yugas, the ages. Karma is the fact that there's an ongoing story, and everything that happens to us is there to teach us. The chakras is how karma is carried from carried in us, how it transmutes and how it carries from lifetime to lifetime in reincarnation. If you just try to understand one piece of it, like do people really incarnate from Atlantis, without having that whole picture, it can sound preposterous. But once you start at any point with that and actually start trying to understand how it all fits together, you get to the point where you know that Atlantis was there, you know what it was like, and you can either remember that you were there, or you can look around and just see clearly the Atlanteans are here. He says not only the Atlanteans, but the Romans, the American Indians, East Indians. It's a whole conglomeration. It's a whole story in itself. And I think I put that in the book because it was so interesting. I did put it there. But no piece of that stands alone. You have to look at the whole story. And then, I mean, it was all foreign to us. Swamiji, in those early years, and I know I described this in Light Bearer, he taught all the classes for years, and then very slowly enough of us became sufficiently competent to be able to do a little bit of it, but he taught all the classes. He taught with tremendous committed energy. He talked with great intensity. He talked faster. He slowed down over the years, and you could just feel like he was wrestling with delusion, almost in the abstraction, because Master had come to this country which was completely uncongenial to these teachings. Just, we didn't know anything about it at that time. And in 1920, he didn't publish autobiography until 1948, and he died in 52. It's interesting. He made rich the soil for 20 plus years, just traveling all over the United States. And he was here almost continuously for all those years. Went to India for a year and a half. But the rest of the time he was here, and he was constantly, just like Swami Kriyananda, just putting out this energy, setting the vibration. And Master said that any place that a master has been, his vibrations remain there forever. Which is very interesting, isn't it? Master was in Dr. Lewis's house. Dr. Lewis was his first American disciple. He was walking up the stairs, and there was a little island, a turn in the staircase in the family home. Master came to that little landing. He said, someone had a vision of God here. And when Dr. Lewis was 6 years old, he'd had a divine vision, and an angel came to him right on that spot. And Master was just walking. He could feel, because it was something eternal that had happened at that point. So Master projected, and it's hard for us to appreciate that everything begins on the thought level and then just filters down. We think that the material world is the big world, whereas in fact the material world is the most contracted. And so Swamiji also just had this responsibility because he could translate a tremendous amount of what Master said into the right understanding for Americans. I mean, Master did a good job of it, and then Swami went from there. And what Swami did is also seminal. He just laid it out. You read his Education for Life book, which is about, just a couple of 100 pages. But if you read every line of that, when you really start looking at it, opens out into a complete revolution for education. You read art as a hidden message, and you get a whole different feeling about artistic creativity that just you could take a paragraph and spend your life working on it. And so Swami just really put forward all these ideas, many of which just broke our little boxes. And he just worked very, very, very hard to get us to understand. And many things that he said, I had to put on the shelf. But once you start with the idea of karma, and then you have to add reincarnation into that, and then all of a sudden the implications of what you're saying just go out so much farther than you realize when you first start. And if you understand the yugas at all and understand there have been higher and lower ages on this planet, then again, those thoughts just go out much further than you realize. We used to joke about it a little, that Master lures you in with a few little promises. Swami lures you in with a few little ideas, and then all of a sudden you realize you've really gotten yourself into something. And I'm half joking, but also it's just like you accept a piece of it, and then if you're thinking, it just keeps going and going and going and going. And pretty soon you're liberated, I hope. But still, what happens is you realize you have no choice. And I don't mean because you're under the sway of some other power. It's just, you just realize, I have to face myself. I have to take responsibility. I have to overcome all my limitations. Just period. There's just no choice. And so you just dig yourself in and start doing it. And then you end up with things like people reincarnating from Atlantis, and it actually is a straight line from one to the other, even though it might not sound like it. It takes much more than one lifetime to work these things out. And those poor Atlanteans, their continent sank. So they were like in the middle of their projects when the continent went under, and then they had to wait until the Yuga came around again. I'm being facetious, but you understand. But who do you think the people are who just come in and start technologically innovating? They're not, this isn't their first incarnation of doing that. They've been waiting for the chance to start again. And we're way low. Atlantis was at the peak. We're about here and in the circle. That's one of my favorites, the old Atlanteans. I just love that one. The old Romans. Anything else? Okay. Any questions or comments or thoughts? Otherwise, I might be at the end of my story. I have another book that I'm trying to write because I have hundreds of notes that did not make it into Lightbearer. They're all on paper, and I was standing next to the file cabinet thinking, oh my gosh, I have to do this before I die. I can't leave this for someone else. Whatever friends I have are going to be very upset with me if I leave it for them. So I started, but it's a huge project. It's essentially, it's the same concept as Swami's book, Conversations with Yogananda, which is everything that's remaining, just in no particular order, just randomly and in wildly varying different things. Advice to ministers about how to give classes, things that I watched, how Swami dealt with beggars who asked him for money. My brain goes a little blank because there's much more than that, but just all kinds of things, funny things that happened that were just silly, that Lightbearer had its own reality, and all that stuff wouldn't fit. But a whole lot of it is very, it lays out a lot of what Swamiji understood of Master's teachings in ways that just haven't come up in other places. So I'm traveling too much now to work on it very seriously, but either when the world becomes unsafe to travel like this, or it becomes impossible, or something happens and I feel I should stop, I'll sit down and work on it. It will probably take a year, I think. I'm going to try to poke away at it, but I don't know if it'll work like that or not. Yes, Padmini?
Where are you going next?
My travels? I'm traveling for the month of May and June, and I know we're close to the end of May now. I'm basically in and out of Palo Alto. I was in Southern California, and next week, after Memorial Day, I'm going to Michigan. Then we're going to Japan for a little less than 2 weeks. And somehow that brings us close to Spiritual Renewal Week, so that's pretty much it. July and August, I'm here. And then in September, we go to Spain. In October, we go to Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Finland, France. I don't know how France fits into that, but France. There might be one more. And then in and out of Italy. And that's October and November. And then we stop for Christmas. And then I'm here for the school play for February and March, which is, I mean, I've only been doing this a few years, but it's nice to just hang out here. And I don't know what'll happen after that. We're going to go back to South America. Ecuador, Argentina, and probably to Colombia. That'll probably be the spring. Yeah, who knows? We'd like to go back to South Africa, but we'd like to go to Cape Town. That felt like the place that had the most possibility, and they speak English. But we haven't been able to find a way, a dynamic enough way to make that work, so we're not doing it yet. We'll see. The world is very much the same. So, yes, Mary.
Sorry. When you speak about, voice.
It's really because people are watching online.
All right. So when you're speaking about reincarnation or evolution of consciousness, or when we die, you know, certain things being kind of, I don't want to use the word set, but we've accomplished a certain amount
Right.
when we die. And karma maybe is set at that moment, or at least there's a certain karma's, a certain plan is laid out at that moment. But does evolution of consciousness, is there an evolution of consciousness? Is reincarnation only about this world, or is it about other worlds?
Oh, it's all of the above. Okay. This is where the chakras come into it. The chakras are the energy centers that run through from the top of the head to the base of the spine, 7 centers. They all, I mean, to simplify it, they all have their own vibrations, okay? They all work together, and they're either guided by the impulse of the chakra itself, or they're guided by the wisdom of attunement with higher consciousness from the spiritual eye. Ideally, all the life energy circulating in all those different vibrations work in harmony to bring us in harmony with our superconscious. In fact, a lot of these vortices in the chakras demand expression on a vibration that's not entirely guided by superconsciousness, that's just guided by the impulse that's there. All of this could be fleshed out a great deal. And on my YouTube channel, you can type in the word chakras and read it and listen. But the point is, at any point ever, we are a vibrating force field which includes all the different dimensions of our awareness. And we don't evolve evenly. You know, certain aspects of it can be highly evolved, certain other aspects can be far less evolved. I mean, we all know that. We can be very effective, for example, in our work, and just chaotic in our relationships. A woman that I knew was very, very good with money, but she could never control her weight. And she said the principles that made her good with money should have been able to make her control her weight, but she couldn't. But she could control money in a really wonderful way. And, you know, just people have different pieces. So all the time we're this combination of energy vibrating, and that energy field creates magnetism, which both repels and attracts. Just depending, because vibrations seek each other out, and they blend or they repel like this. So every day, we're not a fixed entity. Every day, everything we do subtly shifts that energy pattern. But of course, we don't become somebody else in 1 minute. So it's not like today, you know, you're a vegan hatha yogi expert, and tomorrow you're a motorcyclist eating nothing but hamburgers, because we have momentum. So we shift slowly by our experiences, and you can look back over your own life and see it. That energy pattern is really the self. This body is only here because that energy pattern is there. The sperm and the ovum come together because the life force enters, and then the first thing that happens is the little embryo makes a little spine, like a little matchstick, makes the whole spine. So when we die, that energy pattern is liberated, and we go into an energy universe in which things are not fixed. It's all just vibrating patterns of energy, but we're still ourselves because we're still that energy force. So, let me think for just a second. How exactly you phrased the question? I've seemed to have lost the phrase that you asked. Like, how does it?
I can be a little more specific.
Okay. Just go ahead.
Well, specifically, when my mom died,
Mm-hmm.
for years, all I experienced,
If I thought about her, was dark, damp nothingness.
Right.
Literally. I couldn't just access like warm feelings of memory.
Right.
It was dark, damp nothingness.
Right.
Because she had taken her life.
Yes.
It stayed that way for years
Mm-hmm.
until Marianne was born.
Mm-hmm.
And Marianne, with an APGAR of 1,
Mm-hmm.
I always felt like my mother was there to help her come into this life.
Interesting.
And after that, after her birth,
Mm-hmm.
for about 2-3 months,
Mm-hmm.
I felt like if I could just look around, I would see her sitting there.
Interesting.
If the baby was present,
Mm-hmm.
she felt very alive and present.
Hmm.
And I wondered what the difference in that experience was. And then you go forward when Marianne got married,
Uh-huh.
and Marianne asks me to read an article of my mother's words
Hmm.
at her wedding that was in an article in a newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, so she showed up at her wedding also. But I never again had that experience of that dark, damp nothingness. So it seemed like something had happened. She'd been healed, whatever that was.
Well, it's extremely likely that is exactly what happened. What I understand happens, and you've said it out loud, so I'll say it too. Your mother took her own life, and so that's a bad mistake. It's a mistake in the sense that, oh dear, this didn't work. So she wanted to escape from, but she also, as we both know, had some remarkably fine qualities. So it was uneven. She allowed herself to get into a state of distress and despair, and she tried to run away, but she was not by any means a weak or an incapable person with no good qualities. One woman who committed suicide went all the way into the astral world, but then came out again, and it was a near death, but it was a suicide death. She said that many people who commit suicide are in a place of despair. Exactly that, just despair, because everything that caused them to do that has brought them there, and now nothing has worked, because all the fears and all the unhappiness, it just was a failure. So now, what do they do now? They have no other option. So according to this woman's perception, which is completely consistent with what Swami has said, they do sit in despair for a very long time. Now here is the interesting part. She was there in that place and saw all this sadness around her. And she so deeply regretted what she'd done. And she said she was never a religious person. This is so interesting. She said, but the word Jesus came into her mind. And she either said it or thought it, Jesus. And when she thought it, what it caused her to do, it caused her eyes to go up. Because everybody there was like this. Her eyes went up, and she saw right above them were legions of angels trying to communicate to these people that there was no need to be in this despair. They could come into the light. All they had to do was lift their eyes. And then when she did, she was pulled out and came back to her body. One can imagine that your mother sat there for a long time. Time on this side, I'm sure, is different, but for a long time, and then somehow or another, her innate strength brought her to the point where she could look up again. Maybe because your daughter and she had some very tight bond, Maybe Marianne herself persuaded your mother. Maybe she played a part in pulling your mother back into this world. I need you. I want you. Come and help me. Who knows what their life has been. I had similar, distinct, different experiences of my mother after she died that were progressive. And mostly, in this case, it had to do with my father lived 2 more years. And during all those 2 years, my mother was annoyed. And only after my father died. And interestingly, brother, sister, and I, the 3 of us, we'd never said it to each other, but the morning after my father died, we all felt my mother completely differently than we'd felt her. Yeah, she was just like, they were 56 years together and very attached to each other. And I'm sure she was like, what the heck are you doing over there? I'm here. Why are you there? So I think that what you say is exactly true. And who knows what your daughter and her had in common. Yeah, but I would like to think that your daughter helped her and helped you by helping her. Yeah, all those things are true. This is where you finally get to, Atlanteans are reincarnating and it just seems ordinary to you. That's a very good question. Yeah. So when you go into the astral world, you take your energy pattern and you work on it. And then you make as much progress as you can until you need another material body to grow more, and then you get to reincarnate and start over again. But that personality can always be pulled out again, because like if you die, you'll see your mother will come and pick you up, and you think, well, aren't you somewhere else by now? Does everybody have to hang out to greet the next ones? I mean, doesn't anybody ever get to? But I think, how do I know? But I think on the superconscious astral plane, we're not limited like we are here. And I think we do a lot more in that world than we're conscious of. Conscious mind doesn't know it, the soul does it. Swami actually once described spiritual growth is an integration between the superconsciousness and the egoic self. That the ego simply becomes aware of what the superconscious has been doing all along. Interesting way to think about it. All right. I think that will take us through the evening. Thank you all very much for coming. Yeah. If there's anything else that you didn't want to ask to the room or didn't think to ask, I'm happy to answer your questions with the microphone off. Okay.